Ghostbusters 2, The Force Awakens. What do I mean by that? Well, they're both sequels that follow the reboot beat sheets. I'm writer-producer Trader Bubba. This here's Cousin Emmy, and you are watching Bubba Break Sci-Fi.
You're gonna see some serious shit.
So say we all.
Engage.
This video is brought to you by the Cousin Emmy Slimed Magnet, available at traderbubba.com. Discount code in the description down below. Now, I'm a writer-producer in Hollywood. I'm a professional screenwriter. Ghostbusters 2 is basically Ghostbusters 1 without the first act. Now, yes, technically Ghostbusters 2 has a first act. The film opens up, right? We see the baby in the carriage and it's going on its own. This is basically the library scene from the opening of Ghostbusters 1. But the first act in this film is just Dana reuniting with, Egon and Ray and saying, hey, my baby moved, or my baby's carriage moved on its own. Can you guys look into it for me? And then us as the viewing audience seeing very quickly, like, they're still, the Ghostbusters are still around. They're just not really Ghostbusters anymore. Ray and Winston are doing kids' parties, and they get told off by Ivan Reitman's son, Jason Reitman, who ended up directing Ghostbusters Afterlife. And that's really the first act. Now, structurally speaking, it's a solid script. We're introduced to the museum where Dana is working, cleaning and restoring works of art. We're introduced to our sort of villain, Janos, I believe his name is. This is 20 minutes into the movie, and we're still technically in a first act setup here. We're seeing that Peter is reuniting with Dana, that the kid obviously isn't his, that they had a falling out. This is still roughly 20 minutes into the movie. The Ghostbusters have discovered that there's something beneath the street that caused the baby's carriage to move by itself. And then we're coming up on the 30-minute mark. We're like 27 minutes in. So this is kind of the end of the first act. Janos has obviously been possessed. And then we're at like minute 33 here. And this is the end of the first act, going into the second act, really, where you're getting our inciting incident. We finally get to see some ghosts. Finally, half an hour into the movie, there's finally some ghosts. And quite frankly, this is probably the best sequence in the entire movie. Now, of course, here we are. This is the great hero shot. The second act's kicking off. The heroes are back.
Do, Ray,
Egon.
Look, we're 35 minutes into a movie that's about an hour and 45 minutes long. It's technically a long first act on what should really be like a comedy action film. And this is kind of the main problem with Ghostbusters 2, is that first act is a bit of a drudge to get through. And it's not that the writing or anything is bad. They're doing an odd amount of setup for characters that we've already met in a previous film, which is smart, because you don't want to assume that the audience completely knows and remembers, everything from the first movie, especially back then. They spend an awful lot of time of setting up this new relationship between Peter and Dana, who aren't together. It's not Peter's kid. They really got to hammer that home and make sure you understand that little mark. And then setting up the fact that these Ghostbusters have sort of been disbanded, that they got sued, that they're sort of not popular heroes anymore. And then they're forced to come back together in this fun courtroom scene. So this courtroom is really our first, what we call a set piece. This is your big action sequence in action films or whatever. And in a film like this, this is the first sort of real set piece. And it's 35 minutes in. 35 minutes. 35 minutes of setting up characters, mediocre jokes, and just kind of blasé storytelling. That is a huge leap from the original Ghostbusters. We are 35 plus minutes in a Ghostbusters film before we finally get to this. So this is, probably the second biggest set piece in the film, and before the climax, really. Now, obviously, in the original Ghostbusters, in the first act, We got the library scene. We got the Ghostbusters getting kicked out of the university. Peter coming up with the funny idea of even starting a business in the first place. And Ray having to take out like multiple mortgages on some family home. Them finding the firehouse and getting everything set up. And finally, with the first scene in the hotel with Slimer, their first real, ghost busting. There's a lot going on in that first film, and it was funny. It was so 80s. Where in this one, it just quite isn't there. I take a quick second. Usually when I promote the merch, I say how none of the proceeds go to me or the YouTube channel. That all goes to a charity, which is true. Right now, I'm actually raising funds for Cousin Emmy. She's very close to having her first baby, but her husband was recently hospitalized. And unfortunately, that's really eaten up a lot of their emergency funds, which were kind of set in place for her, obviously about to give birth. So I'm doing a GoFundMe. If you get a chance, the link's down below. Again, any proceeds from traderbubba.com, it's all going to that. I appreciate you guys. Now, I will say my favorite scene is in the first act, especially now that I'm a full-grown adult and I actually get the comedy. This is one of the few times in the movie where it plays safe for kids, but it doesn't dumb down strictly for kids, but we'll get more into that later.
I received this information from an alien. As I told my husband, it was in the Paramus Holiday Inn. I was having a drink at the bar, alone. He bought me a drink. I think he must have used some kind of a ray or a mind control device because he forced me to follow him to his room. And that's where...
So the Ghostbusters discover there's a river of slime running beneath New York, and that this slime is empowered, by negative feelings. It's a little weird. Not all that cinematic compared to some of the stuff they did in the first one. But as they go to investigate underground, we get probably the scariest scene in the movie and my other favorite moment of the film.
Hello? Hello?
That was definitely a scene that stuck in my brain as a child. I was 7 turning 8. Still to this day, remember this scene vividly. So anyway, the Ghostbusters cause a scene at a very nice Manhattan restaurant, and they get arrested, and the government gets involved to interfere with their case. Sounding familiar? And then finally we get to see another ghost. The third time we've seen a ghost in this movie, and we're a pretty solid 45 minutes into it. And so the Ghostbusters arrive to the big scary building. This time, instead of a hotel, it's the museum. Ghosts are showing up all over the city. All heck is breaking loose. Cats and dogs are living together, apparently. Oh, no, wait, that's the first one. Now, I will say this movie's got a lot of amazing things in it. This movie has a lot of amazing practical effects that hold up very well. This is easily one of my other favorite moments. You see the woman stepping in the slime, and then her fur coat comes to life. Just absolutely creepy. And then I love how the coat just runs off. And then you get my favorite gag.
He says the Titanic just arrived.
Better late than never.
And then instead of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, of course, we have the Statue of Liberty. And this movie's kind of missing that like superheroic ending. Remember in the first movie how they foreshadowed that you can't cross the streams or you blow up the universe? And then they had to try to stop the big bad guy in the first movie by crossing the streams, knowing that they would probably die in the process. Classic hero stuff. This movie doesn't really have that moment. Staying with the Star Wars Force Awakens reference here, how is Ghostbusters 2 similar to the first one? Well, in the first act of Ghostbusters 2, Peter meets again and falls in love again with Dana. Now, yeah, they have a history, they were separated, but he's back to having to win her over, almost starting fresh and anew. to recapture that chemistry from the first movie. But instead of being introduced to these characters in a fun, comedic, classic 80s way, we're sort of reintroduced to them, and they're all kind of off doing their own things, but it's not nearly as interesting. It's not as funny. And then they're forced to come together when all heck breaks loose in a courtroom. So beat-wise, it's very much the same as the first movie, right? We've got this catastrophic event at a building, a landmark in New York. In this case, instead of a hotel, it is the museum. We have the same problems with the same mayor and a mayor lackey, and then finally all heck breaks loose and there's a floating ball of light in the sky signaling that something bad is coming. Now look, I know it sounds like I'm being extra negative on this film. Please don't misunderstand me. Don't start leaving a bunch of angry comments. I still love this film. It's still Ghostbusters, but you have to know its time and place in history. This came out while the real Ghostbusters was on probably season 3, and the cartoon show of the real Ghostbusters is what really blew up the franchise for kids. That show was a massive hit, sold so many toys, so that when the sequel, the actual live action movie came out, they knew that this movie was going to be huge with kids, and that causes a massive shift in tone and writing from the studio. It still had a lot of great moments. The bad guy was still bad and scary. Every character is given their moment to shine. Winston has more to do in this movie than he kind of did in the first one, which God bless him for that. And, you know, the writers were kind of forced to go, all right, what worked in the first movie that we have to bring back, and what can we do differently? And it's hard. Writing sequels are hard. I've been there. And you're stuck playing in a playground that's been heavily used. Look, it's a Ghostbusters movie. There's ghosts and they're busting it. I'm having a good time. I'm happy with it. And it's easy to crap on studios for interfering in something like this and dumbing it down so it's safe and accessible for a wide audience, meaning kids. And I get that from a business point of view. As a fan, it's like, you know, look, kids love the first movie. There's really not too much in there that was really that bad for them. Don't talk down to us like we're idiots. The head writer for the real Ghostbusters cartoon show, Michael J. Straczynski, I can never get his last name right, said, I will write your cartoon show for you, but I'm going to do it my way, and I'm not going to dumb it down just because it's a kid's show. And that's why that cartoon show works so well. This movie could have learned a few lessons from him. Did make a couple of $100 million for the studio, and they got their money's worth, you know, from critics and fans. You know, the reactions were a little blah, if not mixed, on this movie. And it was enough that they never did the third one. And it wasn't because of like box office reasons like we've seen in so many franchises where we never get that second or third film. It's the actors were just really ready to move on from this. Dan Aykroyd and especially Harold Ramis, who was becoming a very successful director at this point, you know, they put their best foot forward in that original movie. They did everything they wanted to do. They told the jokes they wanted to tell. And you have to understand, these are comedians. Ghostbusters 1 was a giant joke. The whole movie is a giant punchline. And I mean that in all the best way possible. It doesn't mean that you can't have fun horror elements, that you can't have fun action elements. But at the end of the day, they said, I've got this great idea for a premise / joke about these guys who become paranormal exterminators. You know, that's the joke. That's the punchline. And they did the joke. They got the punchline. Everybody laughed, had a good time. That was the first movie. Now go back and tell the same joke, but different, and still make it work. That's really hard. That's incredibly hard. But Harold Ramis and Dan Aykroyd, who did write this script, I think they did just fine. Again, I like this movie. It was a good follow-up. It's a little more kid-safe. I remember loving it as a kid. I can still watch it today and have a good time. And that's all that really matters. And it's unfortunate that we never really got the third movie. You know, Dan Aykroyd had crazy ideas about Ghostbusters Go to Hell. Harold Ramis just wasn't going to come back for it. I don't see him. He was becoming a big director. And then, of course, he had that famous fallout with Bill Murray. Bill Murray was never going to do another Ghostbusters movie. I still can't believe he did the new ones. Bill Murray's the type that if you hire him on a film, you don't know if he's showing up to set, and you got to be prepared. So there were days on Ghostbusters 2 where when they started filming, they didn't know if he was going to come. And then there were changes with the script. The studio had all these notes. So by the time Bill Murray got there and he looked at the script, he's like, what the hell is this? This isn't really what I agreed to. And again, it's the studio interfering and dumbing it down for kids. So Ghostbusters 2, love it or leave it. I love it. I love it. It is what it is. We got the first amazing classic Ghostbusters film. And then we got this, fun, could have been worse sequel. And that's how I look at it. Guys, I'm Trader Bubba. Thanks so much for checking out this video, this deep dive into Ghostbusters 2. Leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think. Do you see the resemblance to Star Wars The Force Awakens here a little bit, though? Do you see what I'm thinking, what I'm saying when I call it Ghostbusters 2 The Force Awakens? Maybe you love Star Wars, though maybe I'm pissing you off because I'm making fun of Star Wars and not Ghostbusters.